Let's see if we're live. Nice. Live on all three. Okay, cool. Yeah, well, welcome. I wanted to put together a quick series, and I figured streaming was the best way to do it. So I've noticed as of late that there's a ton of really helpful tutorials and just guides on how to sort of architect your code or how to kind of YOLO and vibe code an app in like a single sitting. But for me personally, I don't really think that's super effective in terms of being able to build a production ready product. So I wanted to test this out with just doing a very, very simple walkthrough of, okay, how would I go from an idea, like a very simple bare bones idea, to implementing and working through it with the help of Claude and whatever tool I decide to use, and doing it as if it were like a real product I was launching. So okay, so with that, I'm just gonna get into it. For the beginning of these streams, I think for today, what I'm just gonna go through is basically how I would structure. Okay, I have an idea. I want that idea to ultimately turn into code. And so I have a couple things on the screen. I'll explain each one of the tools as I use them. And the ultimate outcome for this stream will be, okay, we have this idea. Let's put pen to paper and let's figure out how we want to approach this from an engineering and build, and then get that into something like a template. And so this is going to be somewhat of a learning experience for me as well. I have experience with these tools, obviously, but I think there's really interesting things to learn every day. So as much as it is like publicly available content, I just think it's pretty interesting to test this stuff out. So as I work through this, I'm going to talk through what the stuff is. So number one, on my right here, we have Obsidian. So I use Obsidian all the time, primarily for note taking. It's just super, super nice and easy to use. You can write all your notes down in Markdown, and it's just really, really efficient. Here we have Claude. I don't need to explain what Claude is. And here we have Linear. So I use Linear for task tracking and project management. They have a really cool MCP server as well. We'll get into that at some point. But what I do want to do is just kind of dive into this idea and how we would go about passing it into Claude and kind of going from there. So the PRD template that you see on my right is a template that I built in the past so that you can have somewhat structured responses and consistent responses from the AI tool that you're using. Ultimately, you're going to send dozens of product requests throughout the life cycle of a product that you're building. You're going to send dozens of feature requests. And in those feature requests, it gets super unmanageable if you don't have somewhat of a similar structure. And then on top of that, once you start feeding these outputs of these PRDs and requirements documents into various AI tools, you're going to end up with a hot mess that's going to be discouraging, and it's going to be extremely, extremely painful to work with. So in this PRD template, it's pretty straightforward. So I just list out, okay, these are the structural requirements. In case I forget to specify my tech stack, ask me for it, and then ask me for specific features. Basically, I passed in some half-ass prompt or like lack of context to the model. Create a PRD with the following sections. So I like my problem statement. I'm not going to read through each line. And then I like my solution overview, then user stories. And ultimately, these user stories go into linear. And then linear, I'll show you how that works. Maybe on the next one. Then acceptance criteria. I really like the given, when, and then format for acceptance criteria. And I don't want this to turn too much into like a product management exercise. So that's not what this is. Technical considerations. Typically, I like to keep the PRDs and the tech integration docs separate. And the reason I like to do that is because I like to pass the PRD to Claude. And then once I agree on the PRD, and it's finalized, then I pass that in for some like higher level architecture guidelines. And then after that, after I do that, I'll feed it back into Claude Code Plan mode, and then use Claude Code Plan to plan out the working session that I'm in. So we'll see that too. And then conditional sections too. So like, hey, if we're touching PII, which is like personally identifiable information, obviously that needs to be, that's categorized as sensitive data. So we need to be careful with how we handle that. If there are any external dependencies, so like, hey, if we're working with this API or this public API, Twitter is a good example. How do we authenticate into that API? Are there rate limits? What do we do if we hit those rate limits? And then if there's super complex transactions, I think the mermaid diagram and just like visualizing the data flow is super important. It's actually super helpful. And most of this is super helpful because I'll go like a day or two working on I'll go like a day or two of not working on a project. And then because there's so much context switching when you come back, to me, it's helpful to have visual indicators of like what I was thinking at the time or what I agreed to at the time. Some basic formatting guidelines, and then tone and style. I like to tweak this because I use these tools frequently. So I kind of know what tone I want to ask from Claude or from whatever tool I'm using. And then at the end, generate a PRD following this exact structure. Okay, so now we're going to create a new project here in Claude. So I'm going to show you what this does. So creating a new project will allow you to basically organize your workspace for whatever you're working on. And let me do that right now. So this project idea that I have is called ToolkitStartUp, and I'll talk about it in a minute. Work through and deliver an MVP web app for Toolkit Startup. Okay, so this over here on the right is product knowledge. And what you can do is as you produce documentation, to give Claude more context to the set of problems that you're looking to solve, you can add additional context so that in every independent conversation you're having, you don't have to go and re-explain what you're doing again. You can basically say, hey, here's documentation about my project. Use this for all requests. It's super handy when you have a project that has a couple of features and you have record keeping, or well, it's really like a great source of truth to manage your context with Claude. Other providers have it as well, but I like using Claude. So I'm going to choose Opus for this. Let me hit my function. Hey, so I want to build, I don't know if this is going to work. on. There we go. All right. Okay, so let's try that again. Hey, I have a new idea for a project. It's called ToolkitStartUp. And what I realized the other day is that for people or solopreneurs, I'll say, or developers that are building a ton of products and projects with AI, there are certain elements to spinning up a new product or a new business that aren't really within the skill set of your average developer. So I wanted to develop ToolkitStartUp to help myself and ultimately help others with tasks that developers don't want to deal with. An example, and probably the first feature that we want to build, is I want ToolkitStartUp to be a SaaS-like product where a user can come in, sign up, they then get asked what project are they building, and we want to ultimately what we want to do is we want to guide them towards doing things like creating a brand identity, creating a logo, creating a color set, and creating a branding kit, and creating and choosing fonts. And ultimately, I want them to be able to use that brand guide and that brand and those brand guidelines to create a social media content calendar and approve or deny content on that calendar. If anything was unclear, please ask me. Let's iterate a few times before we go to a PRD phase. Okay, so that was a god-awful explanation. But, I mean, it's kind of how you do it. All right. So let's see what we get here. So basically, while this is generating, like I'm building a ton of, I'm vibing on a, as I'll say, I'm vibing on a ton of like web apps and micro apps, and a common thing that's super annoying is that, and actually, in order to actually launch what you just vibe coded into the world, there's a ton of stuff on the technical side, but there's also an equal, if not larger amount of stuff on the non-technical side, right? Setting up mailing lists, setting up content calendars, setting up outreach, right? This kind of stuff is super annoying for me, and I don't want to do it. So selfishly, I want to build this so that it can help me with my other projects that I'm working on. I run a development studio, and also I'm a co-founder of another project. So I'm really, really busy when it comes to development work. And for just like these fun side projects that I'm doing, right? These vibe coding projects, I don't want to spend any time really dealing with marketing. I want something to say, okay, well, marketing is a generalization, but I want something to say, okay, here's your brand, here's your logo, here's your colors. Then I can feed that into something like a V0 or pick your UI AI companion. And then I can basically continue to vibe with that design. Cause like, I really don't like how a lot of the vibe solutions look, and I need to find a better word for this, but I don't really like how a lot of the vibe solutions look like ShadCN components. And that's just the bar that we have right now. So I want this to help in a number of different areas. So, all right, enough rambling. Let me get back to this. So, okay, so core concept clarity. So ToolkitStartUp would essentially be a guided workflow that takes developers from I have a working product to I have a branded business with marketing assets ready to go. So it would be something that they return to for ongoing tasks And the thinking here is that as a developer, I would come in and say, here's my idea, here's my product that I'm building. Help me create a brand, help me create a brand brief, help me create a logo, and then help me create a marketing and content calendar. I think what makes sense is we give users the option to have maybe a weekly content calendar. So there's something like an AI assistant or an AI tool embedded in the Toolkit Startup web app that would allow the users of Toolkit Startup to get through the phase of creating their brand brief and then basically establishing a tone of the brand. And then we would help create content for them. We would send it to them or put it on their dashboard for approval for weekly content. And then ultimately, we want Toolkit Startup to be able to have access or connectivity to their social accounts so that Toolkit Startup can automatically post for them. And now that I think about it, it would be cool to have analytics and everything built into Toolkit Startup for multiple social platforms, but maybe that's probably way too much for the MVP scope, but I want to give you as much context as possible for the idea. Okay, so there's that. So let's get to the workflow question. So the tool that I'm using is called Whisper Flow. I really like it a lot because I like talking to my tool. For the brand identity creation, are you envisioning AI generated suggestions? So for the brand identity creation, I'm more focused on the former. So AI generated suggestions that are based off of the brand brief. Tell me if that makes sense. In the branding workflow, users would not have any existing assets. Everything should be created within the platform. I think that's one of the value adds to the platform. I think for the color sets and fonts, the same answer as the previous question, where we have AI generated suggestions that make things like cohesive. But if they want a bunch of different options, then maybe we let them be super flexible. I don't know. When you say create a social media content calendar, yeah, so I am thinking that we would plug in a model that would generate the actual post content. It doesn't necessarily need to always have an image, but there should be content that's created through one of the models that Toolkit Startup provides. Um, I would prioritize LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram probably. I think those are the most important right now. And for the approve and deny workflow, I would think we want to generate batches of content for reviewing instead of like having to have the user come back in every single day or multiple times per day. Because remember, what we're trying to do is ease the burden of the solo developer, the solopreneur right now. And I feel like having them come back frequently is not the best user experience. So for the target user questions, I think generally solopreneurs, they don't necessarily need to be super technical. Like they don't need to be a traditional software engineer. However, the users um, would have some knowledge of building products, whether they're coming from a tool like Lovable or Bolt, etc. And I think the typical pain point is probably the lack of time and also just not knowing where to start. Lack of design skills, sure, could be one, but it's probably lower on the priority list. I think for me, at least for my selfish use, because I'll be the first user of this product, it's really about the time saving and making this tool make my life easier. All right, so we just kind of like went through a lot of stuff. Let's. Okay. The core user journey would be. I really like this clarity at the moment. Okay. So a few more questions to sharpen the MVP. Yeah, so the brand brief process, I think, would be a conversational AI experience. Let's start with something simple for the MVP, and we can tweak it as we get further. I don't understand the question. How deep would it go? Logo generation. I think we should give them vector SVG outputs and PNG JPEG. I don't know. I think we should offer variations depending on what the user wants. And we should also offer them the ability to continue to search for a logo if we can't get what they want nailed down. For the weekly batches, what mix are you imagining? Okay, so let's do. Wait, I don't really understand. What are quote cards and carousels? And clarify this content types question. It's unclear to me. And for number 4, in the approval workflow, yes, users should be able to edit the generated content before approving. They should also be able to ask for new content to be generated. Not the entire week, but let's say they have a day of content that they don't like. They should be able to regenerate it. Oh, you already covered that. Reject and regenerate specific posts. Yes. And setting preferences. Ooh, this is a good one. I think what we should do here is we should allow the user the option to adjust the tone. But again, maybe this is a post MVP feature. And yeah, I agree. Maybe we just start with Twitter and LinkedIn for V1. So guys, this is the real flow of how this stuff gets done. I mean, you could just vibe and try to one shot it all, but without spending time on really, and I wouldn't even call this really thinking about it, but without spending some amount of time on thinking what you want to build and making it a manageable scope, you're going to have a tough time ultimately getting what you want out of these tools. Okay, so back here. How deep would it go? Would the brand brief conversation be, for example? Okay, this is a good question for how deep would it go. I would think that. Oops. That didn't work. Okay, this is a good question. For the how deep would it go, I would actually think that the deeper version is what's your mission? What are your core values? What's your competitor differentiation? These types of questions, a lot of solopreneurs are going to have trouble coming up with on their own. So it might actually be a huge value add for us to give them some assistance with this. I'm curious what your thoughts are. But yeah, again, for the MVP, we do want to keep it lighter and essential, but I really like this, providing them, Providing the largest amount of value so that we can save founders time is super important to me. Ooh, this is a good question. Let's just go with that batch that you have right now. But I think ultimately it would be a good idea to allow users to select what types of posts they want. Maybe this is like a feature in the paid plan or whatever, assuming we make a paid plan. Okay, so now for the MVP scope. So I think if I had to pick one, what would you want the first version to nail perfectly? It would be the time-saving workflow. I really want to make sure we get the workflow down. I feel like we can work on the brand coherence and the content quality as fast follows. If that is off, we should still pay attention to it. But really, I want to make sure we get the workflow down and then go from there. And technical question for the auto publishing, were you thinking of building direct API integrations? I would like to use direct API integrations. I don't really want to pay for Hootsuite. Do you have to pay for Buffer? I don't even know what Buffer is. Maybe I'm like totally out of the loop. That's the one thing I love about Opus is, well, Claude in general, is that it just goes. All right, let's look and see what we got. Here's what I'm thinking for the MVP balance. Keep the conversational flow. Oh, and I just realized that. Let me move over here for a minute. You can't see the bottom output. Well. All right, helping solopreneurs articulate their mission and values is a huge value add. Okay, so I think, all right. I think your suggestion initially for the MVP balance and to keep our MVP build light is correct. Let's keep the conversational flow quick, but hit the pain points. And then for auto publishing, yeah, I thought it was direct API integrations. Are you saying Buffer is a direct API integration? I'm confused on that. You know, the one thing that's going to pop up here too is that if you're a solopreneur and you just created some like crazy app, you probably haven't gone through the pain of like going and creating a corporate email and then creating a Twitter account and securing social handles. That stuff is a pain in the ass. So I wonder if we could actually build a feature to help with that. Maybe this is for a later time. But for now, we will assume that the user has a Twitter account, and then we need to fix that later. I mean, it's saying to skip Buffer, but I know for a fact the Twitter API integration is a pain in the ass. Leave Buffer as an option for now, because I know for a fact that connecting to the Twitter API is painful. Any other questions? Okay. So then here's where it gets really cool. So I'm going to go copy this right now. Oh, this is good. Few final questions. Okay, so business model and user journey. Are you thinking freemium, free tier with limits, or free trial to paid? Okay. I think we should go free trial to paid. Let's just use some basic, like low limit for the free right now. Um, and then we should structure the pay tiers so that users can create multiple projects under one account. But there probably needs to be some limits built into the pricing. So, like, I wonder if we have tiers of projects and pricing. This is also going to be highly dependent on what our usage costs are for the LLMs that we use. Mm. I think thoughts on pricing should be really like cheaper than hiring an assistant, cheaper than hiring a marketing person, cheaper than hiring a content manager, a social media content manager. Ultimately, if this thing works well, we want to. I would like to build it out for larger enterprises, but I want to start small now and see if people actually like it. So maybe make the pricing flexible. Feel free to suggest something. And also, I wonder if we even need to do this right now or if we can figure this out later. I would like the AI conversations to show the brand brief conversation history somewhere. So maybe we give the users in the DB, like once they set up their brand brief, it's attached to their account or it's attached to the project. And then if they want to come back and edit it, then they can, and we have it stored in the database. Should users be able to pause and resume auto posting? Yeah, they should be able to cancel anything at any time, and pause it and schedule it. Like we need to have a pretty robust scheduling feature for them. That's pretty important. Any need for team features eventually? Yeah, at some point, but not even remotely in scope for the MVP. And then how would you handle timely content? I don't have an answer for that yet. And I probably would need the AI to understand their product deeply, which is also super valuable. Maybe at some point we train a model that, or we train some system that basically has context about their business and they can leverage it as a tool for their business. But that's a later feature too. I want to just focus on the MVP scope. Now, everything in this conversation that we've said is a later feature. I definitely want it documented so that we can revisit these ideas later because I think they've mostly been good ideas. Success metrics for the MVP, just getting the thing working is a positive and a success for me. And we can, yes, start with a PRD. Below, you'll find the template for the PRD that I need you to follow explicitly. In addition to that, I want to use Next.js, ShadCN, Tailwind, Supabase, deploying this project on Vercel. I think that's it for now. Let me know if you need any clarifications on the tech stack or the PRD template. Okay. That's annoying. I'll fix that for the next stream. Okay, so now I have my PRD template over here. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to use a delimiter and then just drop it in here and then boom. We're going to fire this large. Nice. So this went on a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but hopefully it's helpful. It's helpful for me. Hopefully at some point someday it'll be helpful for someone else. Yeah, like I said, this thing just goes. I mean, it just fires. Okay, so let's just start. let's just start walking through it and seeing how clear we got. Okay, so problem statement, so developers building products. Everything created in platform, batch approval, AI. Not a social media management platform for teams, for non-product businesses, not handling paid advertising. User stories. I'm just going to blaze through these really quick, and then I'll check these out before the stream tomorrow and make sure that I document anything that we ended up changing. Or maybe I'll just start with a quick recap on this, and then if we need to change something, we can. But my goal, just to reiterate, my goal is to kind of go through this whole thing with doing it all on stream. Okay, brand identity creation. I mean, this looks pretty good. Oh, that's like a small thing, right? Next.js 14, we should be using 15. So there are a couple of small things that we need to talk about, and like OpenAI API for conversational flows and content generation. Maybe. I guess GPT-5 is supposed to come out tomorrow. We'll see. But maybe we use the OpenAI API. I feel like that's going to be expensive though. So maybe what I'll do is kind of research or decide on what I want to use in the next day or so, and then next time when we come back, have a clear understanding of what we want to do. Okay, so basically, before I wrap up, what we're going to do is we're going to come back and look at this PRD and make sure that everything is aligned with a very low scope MVP. Make sure our user stories are correct. Then I'm going to take those stories and stick them in this new project in Linear. And OV Studio is the name of my studio, by the way, or my dev shop. So we're going to call this ToolkitStartUp. This is the, we'll just call it TKSU, linear space. Add the PRD here later. So we'll do that together, and we're just going to create this project. So when we come back tomorrow, we'll work on creating tags, creating labels. This is all more admin stuff, but it's annoying, and it's probably not what you want to see. But again, I'm just doing this as if I was actually going through my day-to-day, so you can see kind of, not just the attempted one-shot stuff, but how I think people actually use these tools, at least how I use these tools. Cool. Well, I'm going to wrap up. That's it for today. We'll keep making progress on this next. Thanks.